Okay, this lecture is over layers 5, 6, and 7, which are sometimes referred to as the upper layers of the OSI model. We'll just go through this pretty quickly. Again, the PDUs for layers 5, 6, and 7 is data, 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 so they're all data. The purpose is to implement network communications related to applications. So layers 5, 6, and 7 is where application development occurs. That's why they're often grouped together, because we care about networks. We don't care quite as much about developers that are developing programs that are going to use the network. So what I'm going to use for an example is we'll probably come back and delve into this a little deeper, but I'm going to use the DNS datagram format. So first thing we have is an identification, sometimes called a transaction ID, and this is generated by the device that's doing the DNS query, and it is used to match replies from a DNS server with the actual queries that were made. Next, we have 2 bytes of flags. We'll look at these in much more detail when we formally talk about DNS, domain name service. We have a number of queries. This is how many questions we're asking in this DNS query. And then we have the number of answer resource records. And then we have the number of authority resource records. And we have additional resource records. And then we actually have the question or questions. And then if this is a reply, then we have answers. And as we'll see, these can be quite large here in a moment. But those are all the parts of the DNS query. We have the answers, we have the authority, and then we have that additional info we talked about. So let's jump into Wireshark and look at this. So this is a capture that I did. If you look down here, layer 5, 6, and 7, I have it expanded. It says this is part of a domain name system, and it's a query. And then, like always, over in the right, we have highlighted the portion of this that is actually related to DNS. So the first thing we had was the transaction ID, which is shown there. Next we have flags. 0100 and hex means this is a standard query. Then we have the number of questions, which is highlighted, which is 1. And then we have the number of answers. Since this is a query, that is 0. Excuse me, we haven't talked to any DNS servers yet, so the number of authorities is 0. And then finally, additional information. Again, this is a query, not a response, so it is 0. The next field we have is the actual query, and the first thing we have is label count, which is 3, which means there's 3 parts to queries. Another way to say that is there are 3 parts of a name separated by 2 periods. So www is 1 part, Microsoft is 1 part, and com is 1 part. Then the name is, the length is 17. The way we got that by looking at the type of record. Right before that record, the 00 is the null that terminates the string. And then finally, the type is 1, which means it's an address record, and the class is 1, which means it is an internet record. Note, this is packet 394, and it tells us that our response is in 395. We'll just take a really quick look at 395, and we see that this is a huge response with lots of answers, lots of resource records, and that type of thing. So that's a real brief discussion and example of layers 5, 6, and 7 of the OSI model.